and welcome to another video. Today what we're going to do is have a look at the supporting episode for those of you who are doing the sitcom study for component 2, which is the pilot episode of Friends. I know that I've been working a lot on Friends in the IT crowd recently. I am coming to the end of those videos, so I'll be moving on to something else within the next couple of days or maybe even the next week. If you have any suggestions for videos that you would like to see, if you think that you would like some more information on something, then just pop it in the comment section below or get in touch with me through social media, because I am at a point now where I have videos up for every part of the exam regardless of which options you are taking for component 2, and so I'm just filling in the gaps where I feel like there needs to be a little bit more information. So get in touch if you would like me to make a specific video on something. What we're going to be looking at today are the props. Now, I've realised as I was making this video that generally speaking, Friends seems to have an awful lot more props compared to the IT crowd. Comparatively, the sound in Friends was very few. There was very little elements of sound, as you may have seen in the previous video, but props there seems to be quite a bit more of, and that's partly due to the fact that they use props to create humour a lot more in Friends, and they sort of use it as a physical element of comedy rather than through the language that's being used. So getting into this video then, what I've done is started off with just 2 examples of props, and this comes predominantly from the title sequence, so I thought it'd be better to look at the title sequence first and then go into the episode as a whole. So within the title sequence, obviously the first thing that we notice are the coloured umbrellas. These umbrellas match the coloured dots that go in between the letters of Friends, so we've got a sort of house style that's being established here, but they also add contrast because we've got dark, low-key lighting within the title sequence itself. It's set at night, but we've also got that monochromatic dress code. We've got the black and white, so this adds a little pop of colour and a little bit more interest, as well as making it a little bit more fun and playful. Equally, the lamp and sofa are used within the title sequence not only to give a sort of homely feel and to suggest perhaps the settings that are going to come further on within the episode or within the series itself, but they also give this idea that the characters are sitting down to watch something, and that's almost this sort of meta experience in the way where we're watching the characters who are also watching something else, and so it not only adds that extra dimension and that extra element, but it also gives us an element of relatability right from the start. We relate to the characters because they're sitting down to watch something just the same as we are. Now, moving into the episode as a whole, we start off in CentralPerk, and obviously we've got things like the coffee cup and magazines. These are all used within CentralPerk to create a realistic experience. So we would expect to see things like coffee pots, coffee cups, mugs, all that sort of stuff. If we didn't see that within the setting, then we would have this moment where we couldn't really connect to it as well as we do. It also adds to relatability of the setting, so particularly for audiences who, like the characters, were perhaps in their 20s, who met up together to have coffee and that sort of thing, then that would give a sort of relatability. The oversized cups are relatable to America mostly compared to the UK, but they also create this element of humour because they are so large, and they also create this idea of coziness as well, the idea that you can wrap both hands around your mug and it gives that sense of relaxation and ease and support. Now, Ross's umbrella adds to the overall view of him as someone who's very depressed and uptight. When we think of somebody who's depressed or who's very down and pessimistic, we normally have this image of them being under a dark or under a rainy cloud, and that's exactly what Ross seems to present here. But this is the first instance where we also see props being used for physical comedy. So when Ross first meets Rachel, the umbrella springs open, and that's this sort of metaphor for arousal, the idea that Ross immediately sees Rachel and it's sort of love and desire at first sight. The cookies that we then see, which Chandler holds, he has this plate of cookies, give again another form of physical comedy because he uses those as a prop to create his joke. But they also show that his character is more playful and more relaxed. He doesn't take things as seriously rather than the sexual physical comedy or the sexual connotations of the physical comedy that we've had with Ross. We then have sort of the sugar packet and the spoon I've put together. So basically when Rachel comes in and she sits down, they get her cup of decaf coffee. She asks for some sweet and low. It's humorous because initially they're relatable, but it's the fact that Ross is the one who takes a sugar packet, puts the sugar into her drink, then takes the spoon, then stirs her drink for her, shows how Rachel automatically has this sort of power or this influence over men. We move then to Monica's apartment where they're watching a television show on Monica's telly. I have identified which television show it is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is in my breakdown of this episode. So if you're interested, have a look at that video. Now, initially, this creates humour because the characters are together, their reactions are hilarious, the sort of chanting of "push her down the stairs" is quite humorous, but it also brings the characters together. It suggests that they do this often, that they go round to each other's apartments and they watch the television together, showing the sort of close-knit bonds that we've got between the characters. Now, the television is used later on as well, and it gives us a little bit of intertextuality when Rachel's watching Joni Loves Chachi on the television, and sort of contrasting the fact that she's alone, but the characters on the television are not. Thinking back to sort of when we first go into Monica's apartment, Rachel on the telephone is hilarious. Adds an element of context, first of all, because the landline telephone is huge. It's boxy. It's what my generation would lovingly refer to as a brick. Modern audiences might not be familiar with that because we are in a sort of time now where we've got small, stylish mobile phones for a start, but also sort of cordless phones in our house as well. Now, it creates humour for Rachel. Initially, we see how out of touch she is when she's having a conversation with her dad and can't make herself understood. But we then see how erratic she is and how dominant a personality she is, I guess, in that when she's leaving multiple voice messages for her ex-fiancé, she makes the situation all about her and doesn't stop to consider that perhaps he wouldn't want to hear from the bride who's just run away from him at the altar. Now, we then have, when the characters are watching the television, when they're watching the Spanish show and the woman's just fallen down the stairs, we've got mellow yellow cans which are all on the coffee table in front of them. So this acts as product placement within the show. Not only are all the characters drinking the same thing, which is slightly unrealistic, I suppose, but the logo is very clearly visible towards the camera, so we've got our first element of synergy here as well. Later on within the episode, we have Chandler and Joey making sandwiches in Monica's apartment. So this is a long-running joke that goes throughout all 10 series of the show. It gives this idea of them scrounging or freeloading from Monica, but it not only sort of sets up Joey and Chandler as these two guys who can't really fend for themselves and who need Monica to look after them, but it also shows how close they are as friends. The idea that Monica's fine with them taking her food shows how close they are. Now, when Paul the wine guy buzzes up, we have this idea of the intercom. Obviously, this is relatable to the setting. It's something that we would expect to find within an apartment, particularly because Monica appears to have a very, very high up apartment, if not the penthouse apartment, given the balcony, given the sort of slanted windows that we can see within her apartment. We would expect to see an intercom. It also acts as a sort of potential for humour through dramatic irony. So we are very often aware of things that are happening in the apartment that obviously the person who's buzzing up is not. Moving to Ross's apartment then, flat pack furniture is stereotypically a nightmare to put together. This is something that's well known. Even today, I would argue that flat pack furniture is a nightmare to put together. So it's likely that the audience would have experienced this before, and this obviously creates humour, but it creates humour through something called Schadenfreude, which is basically having humour or finding something funny because it's happening to somebody else and not to you. The beer creates a sense of male bonding between, obviously, Joey, Ross and Chandler, but also acts as a form of satire when they're discussing Ross's ex-wife. Now, this is going a little bit off topic, but it's worthwhile mentioning here. It seems as sort of good a place as any. There's a lot of discussion, particularly if you have a look online, about the way that Friends dealt with things such as the lesbian relationship that Ross's wife is in, but also the way that gender and sort of issues around gender and feminism and same-sex relationships are dealt with within Friends. It's worthwhile keeping in mind, if you are commenting on Friends, that this is very much a product of its time. So when Friends was made, there were very, very few shows that featured same-sex relationships at all. The fact that Friends does this is very brave of it as a show. Now, we could argue that, yes, they're playing on stereotypes within the show, such as Ross's wife drinking beer from the can and liking to drink it from the can, suggesting that perhaps she's a little bit more masculine or a little bit more butch than other wives or other women of the period. But equally, we could argue that this is satire and that the programme is pointing out how ridiculous it is to hold these sorts of stereotypes. So it's something that's worthwhile considering when we're looking at elements of historical products like Friends, or if you're doing crime drama, things like The Sweeney as well. Now, Monica, when she's in the restaurant, appears to be in a sort of Asian restaurant, perhaps Chinese or Thai or Japanese. She's drinking what is called sake at the restaurant, so it's a clear sort of alcohol, and this obviously creates physical comedy when she spits it out all over Paul the wine guy. We know what's going to happen here, so we could argue that this is a form of slapstick comedy. I mean, there is a huge pause between Monica picking up her drink and actually taking a drink, so it really does emphasise and set up what is going to happen here. While Monica's on her date though, Rachel is at home. She's got her wedding dress with her as she's on the sofa. Now, although the wedding dress can be considered a dress code, it can also be considered a prop here, because Rachel's using it to sort of dry her eyes. And this really does indicate a lack of care over her wedding. The idea that she doesn't mind if it gets dirty, she doesn't mind if she cries into it. We then see the following day, so we have a scene change, how out of touch Rachel is with modern society. She can't even make a cup of coffee correctly. So when Joey and Chandler pour their drinks away into the potted plant, this creates a sense of dramatic irony and also foreshadowing for what is to come later on, because we know that Rachel's going to go out and get a job and she's not really all that qualified for anything else. Now, also during this scene, Monica obviously lets Paul the wine guy out of her apartment, and the characters move the table so that they can get a better look at what's happening. This creates humour because they want to know what's happening and they go to a sort of an extreme extent to get that information, but it also makes the show a little bit more relatable, and we feel more connected to the characters because we also want to know what's happening with Monica and Paul the wine guy. Okay, so Rachel obviously can't find a job. She goes out and buys her boots. So this establishes her character more as somebody who is spoilt, who is a bit of a shopaholic. But it's also arguably one of the catalysts for her changing. So the whole episode is a catalyst for Rachel changing, and we get that initially where she runs out of her wedding, but later on when she buys these boots and doesn't seem to have any sort of understanding that she can't pay for them herself. So we then have this extreme close-up of the scissors and obviously all of Rachel's bank cards on the table. It emphasises Rachel's wealth and also the idea of the sort of extent of her problem that she's got this many credit cards. Paul's watch, so we're getting close to the end of the episode now. Monica and the audience get this kind of karma when she destroys Paul's watch. It's this moment where Monica becomes sort of more fearless, and initially we feel sorry for her and we empathise with her, but now we feel more proud of her because she's not letting it sort of get to her or upset her. It also adds humour through irony because obviously we've heard from Paul the idea that he broke his ex's watch when she cheated on him. So we get this sort of cyclical narrative and also this sense of irony as well. Final two then. So obviously once Monica's gone to bed, Ross and Rachel share a biscuit. We know right away that this is an Oreo. I mean, again, it's a sense of product placement. It's also very iconic. It's iconically American and instantly recognisable as well. The idea of them sharing has connotations and links to other programmes. So things like Lady and the Tramp, where they share the spaghetti, all that sort of stuff, to set up and to establish this idea that Ross and Rachel are going to get together. Now, this is a storyline that takes the whole 10 seasons, the whole of Friends, to resolve. So it's quite interesting and very clever, this idea that that's set up right from the beginning of this show. Finally, we have the coffee pot, which is a close-up, extreme close-up to begin with. We hear Rachel's voice from off camera. We don't actually see that it's Rachel, so the foreshadowing from earlier comes into play. And also we have this sort of dramatic irony that it's Rachel who is making coffee or pouring coffee when she can't make a cup of coffee at all. And so this again brings the narrative for this particular episode all the way through to a full circle. Hopefully that made sense. We've got quite a few key terms today, so if you're not sure what any of these mean, have a look, see if you can find some definitions for them, and then either write them up onto note cards or make your own little glossary to help you with media studies. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the button below. For every person who subscribes, you will get a shout out at the beginning of the next video. So if you have already subscribed but I've not given you a shout out yet, it probably means that your subscriptions are private. So just send me a message in the comment section below or through either of my social media, and I will get you put into the next video as a shout out. You can also get in touch with me through the comments or through my social media if you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, suggestions, anything at all. Pop them in the comment section below. I will go through every single person who comments and respond to them in any way that I can, whether that means a full reply or whether it's just me giving a like to what you're saying because you're supporting the channel. I am still running a questionnaire at the moment. This is going to be wrapped up at the end of the weekend, so if you haven't already, please have a look at that and have a go at answering those questions. Then it's not too long, it won't take you very long at all. It's just so that you guys can give me some idea of what I need to do to make the channel better and to make it a more interesting place for you to learn and a more useful place for you to learn. I'll pop the link to that in the description box below. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow for another video.